He fought through hell when the world fell to demons. Through horrific experiments, he gained terrible power, but even he couldn't stop the end. Now given a second chance, he awakens 10 years before the invasion. Master of martial arts, teacher of heroes, the man who never surrendered to save humanity. He'll rebuild everything, train the invincible, and strike before darkness returns. When hell returns, we'll stand against it. Let's find out. 40 years ago, a massive interventional gate opened in the sky, and then they descended, those who would be called demons in the future. Upon their appearance, they declared their conquest of humanity. This was the beginning of the demon invasion. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the Orthodox Alliance created the Orthodox Heavenly Demon Extermination Corps and declared their subjugation. 3 days later, they encountered a force of demons in Hanoi and were wiped out a year later. During this year, half the population of the Central Plain was killed. The Orthodox and Unorthodox were in forces united to form the last line of resistance in Sichuan. The battle lasted more than half a month. 90% of the resistance army was killed, and the Central Plain was officially destroyed. The survivors became slaves and were taken to the demon realm. The protagonist Abby Gang was also captured and taken there. 5 years passed. He, who had been unable to use internal energy since birth, was classified as a rare species. After various experiments and brainwashing, he became part of the army subjugated to the demon kingdom. Decades passed after that, invading other dimensions and causing carnage. He killed, hacked, and destroyed. 70 years after he became a slave warrior, his merits were recognized and he became a commander among the demons bearing the name Squitz von Gretel. 220 years after he was promoted to commander, he finally found out about it. He wasted 50 years trying to find the conditions and ways to manifest it. And after 65 years, he began a rebellion for which he carefully prepared a week after the rebellion. Again, it failed miserably. The battlefield was littered with dead demons stabbed with swords and arrows. Beginning was still alive, and now he stood before the demon king Tarrant, breathing heavily. MC looked up at him and he drew his sword, noting that it was such a disappointment they risked all their savings for a rebellion of this level. He addressed Gang by the name Switz von Gruntal, which immediately angered him and told him through inchy teeth not to call him by that name. His name is Sabi Gang. Tarrant paused for a moment, thinking about something, and said that he really didn't understand. He had been observing people like him all this time. Although his abilities and talents were meager, he always had a stubborn goal to survive no matter the situation. This was his only strength. But why did he decide to act so recklessly after everything? He answered him. It was because he had to experience this at least once, so that the next time they fought, he could be sure of his victory. He had no choice but to fight him at least once. The Demon King remarked that it sounded interesting enough, but it was also a stupid way of thinking. Did he expect him to give him a second chance? He would die here and today. MC tensed his palm and all his fingers, shouting that he wouldn't let him kill him. Then with a mad grin, grabbed his chest armor and screamed loudly, trying to tear it apart. After that, a magical beam of light shot into the sky and pierced 3 magic circles. This glow emanated from the gang. The Demon King looked at him and said that this was a temporary regression, the power of Nazarin, the ancient evil god. Now everything was clear to him, the reason why he silently endured his defeat. And humiliation for 200 years was all for this. He smiled widely and shouted that he would see everything soon. Next time he would prepare even more thoroughly and beat all the souls out of him. All the demons would die. Tarrant liked his mood and laughed, saying that he would look forward to it because he was the only person he recognized. After that, the glow intensified, and EMC disappeared somewhere in the central Murim. Lane, a quiet night passed, but the silence was broken by a roar. Lightning suddenly struck the roof of the building, punching a hole, and B-Gang was now lying on the floor among the rubble. As soon as he came to his senses and opened his eyes, he realized that 10 years remained until the demon invasion. Time passed, and it turned out he was at the Orthodox Alliance's Martial Arts Academy, specifically the Back in Spring Academy. Several days had passed since then, and 2 men came to repair the hole in the roof. One was nailing boards and the other was holding them, and he said he couldn't believe lightning struck out of nowhere. His friend agreed with him and added that this lightning was powerful enough to destroy the roof of the training hall, but they should be glad that only this idiot was injured. The man didn't understand who he was talking about, and he told him that it was the assistant instructor, an orphan who was brought back by Dr. Jim Beck, the one struck by lightning a few days ago. He asked, is this the same martial arts instructor who doesn't know how to use internal energy? As far as he heard, he wasn't seriously injured. His friend chuckled and said that it would have been better if he had died then, because today would be his public execution. Meanwhile, all the academy students and instructors had gathered in the arena. Today was the duel for the position of assistant spear instructor at Dragon Spring Academy. As soon as the official start of the duel was announced, the students were delighted. On one side was the current assistant spear instructor Sa Abang, and on the other was his opponent, a contender who was recommended for the position of assistant instructor. the invincible divine sphere Manson Delk. A request was received to test assistant instructor Sob Gang's abilities, so this duel would determine which of them deserves to be assistant instructor. They both had to fight, putting their honor as martial artists on the line. Sandy Hook slammed his spear onto the floor and told his opponent that he seemed better than he expected. He heard lightning suddenly strike him. He thought he was just making up some excuse to avoid fighting him, but since he had finally shown up, he would quickly put an end to it given his bravery. Or he might just give. UMC said that in the very distant future, there was an instructor at the Arts Academy who couldn't use internal energy. Unfortunately, it was just because he was born with this peculiarity, but it couldn't be helped. He was naturally despised by others. In the end, this incompetent instructor, who was known as the shame of the Martial Arts Academy, suffered a terrible defeat in a public duel. He was expelled from his post and had to do menial jobs and assignments. He had truly experienced terrible days. Zodiac frowned and asked what kind of nonsense is he telling him. After that, began to spread his legs shoulder-width apart, preparing for a fight, and said that he had been waiting for this moment. For a long time, he called him a freak and beckoned him towards him with his finger, which immediately made the man angry, and exclaimed how dare he act so arrogantly. He stomped his foot so hard that cracks appeared across the arena, and he shouted that he wanted to leave him some of his pride because he was an instructor, but it was time to pay for his filthy mouth. After that, he used his martial art, the Demon Bull Spear, and with rushed to attack, he screamed loudly, spraying saliva, and struck with the first form of his martial art, the Brutal Bull Charge. The impact raised dust, but something made him doubt. The feeling he should have gotten from his spear did not arise. When the dust cleared, he saw that the gang was no longer there, and his voice came from behind him. He said thoughtfully that although it looked decent enough, he had to hit the target for it to have any effect. Sandal immediately turned around, swinging his spear, and he jumped and dodged the blow, then landed nearby. The man gritted his teeth and wondered what just happened. How could he so easily dodge his technique, which he had practiced for decades? He was told that he was weak, but this was not at all like what he had just seen. MC clicked his tongue and remarked that it was so slow, how could he teach someone with such... Bill Sunday-Ock decided that this couldn't be true. He was just lucky, and gathering all the strength in his legs, he jumped high and pounced on him in midair, wishing him death. This time he decided to use the fourth form, the falling bull kick, and Big Gang, following his gaze, adjusted his grip on the spear and began to spin it. He stopped, assumed a more comfortable stance, and his opponent shouted that there was no chance that this half-baked spear technique could block his strike. MC extended his hand toward him, and a fireball appeared in his palm, which took Sunday off by surprise. He clearly hadn't expected this. Because of this, he couldn't react. A second later, the fireball struck him, and an explosion echoed, sending a roaring sound throughout the area. Everyone watching the duel was in complete shock. Sandek fell and began rolling around the arena to try to extinguish the fire, and one of the senior instructors excitedly announced the end of the duel, with the assistant instructor Sabi Gang emerging victorious. While his opponent was being doused with buckets of water, MC waved to everyone in the audience and reminisced about his past. He had been captured by demons drawn into their realm, and had survived as best he could for hundreds of years in the process. He realized something very important. High-level magic was indistinguishable from martial arts. He turned to the seniors and asked what they thought of his martial art. It was called Fireball. Afterward, his charred opponent was carried away on a stretcher, and he waved goodbye, saying it was a good fight, and everyone present began whispering. No one understood what it was. Someone in the crowd said that rumor had it that it was Hit Ryan's Your Art word. Meanwhile, one senior instructor was in complete shock. The second was more or less calm, and the third was downright furious. The calmest one congratulated the gang on his victory, but he thought he couldn't use his internal energy. He replied that he was just lucky. A few days ago, he ate an herb he'd never seen before, and suddenly he could use his internal energy. Fortunately, he now has a lot of internal energy. Senior instructor Chilan Semyon exclaimed. What kind of joke is this? How can he even say such nonsense to his seniors? Does he want to insult them all? He replied that whether he believes it or not is their choice, but what does it matter? Did he cheat in the duel? It was a fight for a spear training position, but there were no rules stating that fighting had to be with spears only. He doesn't understand why he's being questioned. This was when he won fair and square. Semyon became angry, and the man next to him put his hand on his shoulder, asking him to calm down. He was too angry. After that, he told Big Ang that he was right. He won the stool. He wanted to say something else, but EMC raised his hand and apologized for interrupting him. But since everyone was here, he had one request. He thrust his spear into the floor and folded his hands in a respectful. You're saying that he was asking them to conduct a test so he could be promoted to official instructor? After everyone left, he decided to stroll through the academy. Everyone followed him with surprised glances, now known as the one who participated in the duel. The gang looked around and, after examining the majestic building, thought it was the Dragon Spring Academy, one of many martial arts training halls created by the Orthodox Alliance. To prevent difficulties in Murim, the purpose of the academy is to cultivate martial artists who will become the backbone of the Orthodox Alliance in the future. They accept children aged 15 to 18 from sects and clans who are old enough. Instructors are martial artists from the Orthodox Alliance. They are divided into assistant instructors and senior instructors. But in order for assistant instructors to actually teach children, his thoughts were interrupted when he was about to enter his room. Genbok stood behind him, clearly puzzled by what happened in the duel today. He asked how he suddenly knew how to use internal energy. What did he do? Jinbike is the master of the Body Restoration Pavilion. He is not an instructor, but a doctor who takes care of patients. MC replied that as he had already said, it was luck. The man explained that this was complete nonsense. He knew that he had been treating him for a long time, since the day he learned that he could not use internal energy. He tried every possible method to cure him. At that moment, his voice trembled, causing Bang to turn around, and he clutched his head, fell to his knees, and cried, asking if it was something that could be fixed so easily. Then how could he be such a useless doctor? Knows better than anyone that he was hated by others. Because of this, he is too ashamed to look him in the eyes. Now he began to apologize to him, and he froze, then thought with a smile that he had not changed at all. For him, he is like a father. 542 years ago, that is 15 years, this man was the one who ran into the fire to save a dying child in the middle of an ambush by bandits. He's also the one who died on that fateful day trying to save others. However, this time he will try to make sure he does not die. He took his hand and told him that he does not need to blame himself and not to worry about him. Jemvek looked at him in surprise and with a smile asked him to trust him. He would solve all problems from now on. Night fell and he went to the window and looked at the moon and the sky, then tried to use his magic. Looking at the sparkling blue magic circle, he thought that when he regressed, he lost more than 90% of his mana. Now he can only muster about the 4th circle. It was such a disappointment. It took him hundreds of years to reach the 8th circle, but he should be grateful that he still had mana. That's right, he returned from that hell. Muriel's history was changed. The demons had not yet begun their invasion. However, the 3D word here is yet in exactly 10 years, the demons will begin their invasion, and when that happens, Murim will fall again. However, this time, everything will be different because he still has 300 years of memories. Information about the demon army, such as the type of magic they use, the artifacts and weapons they have prepared for the invasion, and most importantly, how to defeat them. His face contorted. Rage, and he was distracted from his bad thoughts by Jinbike entering his room. He told him that the vice master of the academy, Cheon Semyon, was looking for him. He asked in confusion right now, and he asked him to convey this message to him. The pavilion master sighed and said that he did not mind, he was more worried about him. He thought it was regarding his request for a promotion. He should be careful. He was sure the test would be difficult. Since Man Sondak, the person he recommended, failed in such a way, he was sure he would not have any positive feelings towards him. In any case, why did he suddenly decide that he wanted to become an official instructor? MC threw on his clothes and answered him with a smirk. But this was the first step to correcting the situation at this academy. After that, he left his room and headed towards the head instructor, Dragon Spring Academy. Was once famous enough to be considered the best of the top 3 Orthodox martial arts academies. However, 2 years ago, the academy's master, also one of the top 10 martial artists, suddenly disappeared. The academy searched for him for 2 years without success, as it was difficult to replace such an experienced specialist. As a result, the academy lost its glory. He opened the doors and, walking inside, glanced at Simeon and thought that besides this idiot was the accelerator of the fall of Dragon Spring Academy. Immediately after, Chan Samsung said that he would ask this one last time. Was he seriously insisting on his request for a promotion? He confirmed this with a smile and thought that on the day of the demon invasion, huge rifts opened on all sides and previously unseen monsters began to kill everyone. Insight, panic, horror, screams. This was the beginning of the invasion of unknown creatures, which they later called demons. The academy's young students were mercilessly slaughtered by these monsters. That day, he saw someone escape with Instructor Dung, taking with them a couple of chests and bags of riches. If the Vice Master hadn't fled first, if he had simply reported the situation, if he had activated the Academy's defense system, such a huge number of deaths would have been prevented. He still clearly remembers the screams of the students who were sacrificed that day. True, it hasn't happened yet because he returned to the past, but he will never forget its disgusting, ugly face. After his answer, Instructor Dunn decided to tell him about the test for his promotion. It was an attack on the Demon Knight Fortress Bree gang. Slightly surprised and asked, does he mean the bandits in the mountains behind the academy? Semyon confirmed this and said that he needed to kill them. This was his test. The Demon Knight Fortress was a group of bandits located on an old sacred mountain not far from the academy. Due to frequent reports of damage inflicted by this bandit group, an order was given to attack them in the interests of civilians. This order was signed by the Vice Master of the academy, and now he read it, after which he thoughtfully agreed to do so and asked how this related to the work of an instructor. Seeming answered that it obviously concerned the most basic requirements for an instructor. Senior instructors are the main force in the academy, as well as masters of martial arts. The lightning blade sword technique's senior instructor is Chun Semyon, the tyrannical tiger sword technique's instructor. Stone Boyong, the soul-haunting arrow archery technique's instructor, is On Butch, and the divine sword's dark shadow sword technique's instructor is Sun Pelegi. All of them are officially recognized by the Orthodox Alliance and have achieved great successes such as eliminating the leaders of the evil demonic fighters or defeating bandits. MC was too lazy to listen to all this and interrupted him, saying that he understood everything. How much time did he have? Burong was angry that he dared to behave so rudely and was about to say something, but Samuel stopped him and told Bigang that he had exactly 2 weeks. If he was even 1 day late, he would forever miss his chance for promotion. He smirked and asked, 2 weeks they would see each other in 3 days, by which time he would already be back. After that, he left under the furious layers of the senior instructors, and Byong turned to the vice master of the academy, asking if he was really going to promote this insolent boy. He replied that he shouldn't worry, their poor assistant instructor wouldn't come back from there. The man didn't understand what he meant, and MC meanwhile quickly headed towards the mountains and mentally called Samyang a lying idiot. He thinks he doesn't know what he's up to. Demon Knight. Fortress. It was during this that the Green Forest Alliance began to enjoy glory. People don't know much about them yet. At the moment, they're a small organization. The real problem is their leader. Meanwhile, Semyon told the instructor about his plan, and he asked in surprise, "Is he serious?" The head of the Green Forest Alliance is a top-level martial artist. Semyon said with a smirk that the master of the Demon Knight Fortress at Cam is no ordinary bandit leader. Even the Orthodox Alliance believes he's actually the former leader of an unorthodox sect called the Heaven Destroyer sect. People believe he was killed by traitors several years ago, but in fact he managed to survive. He found and killed every single one of them, and the brutality of his revenge caused even the unorthodox Murim to place a bounty. In his head, he'd been in hiding, and recently arrived here. Instructor Dong inquired how he knew all this, and he asked why he was asking. Begging certainly made an impression during the duel today, but that was only possible because he was hiding his true skills. However, this test is a real-life situation, not a duel, so he's certain he won't return alive. Morning soon arrived, and MC was still on his way. Reaching the edge of a cliff, he used levitation and flew to a high mountain peak, thinking that if this act Gojam was as he remembered, then the 4th circle of magic wouldn't be enough to defeat him. The solution was simple. He would increase his mana and gather another circle, as his experience and knowledge of magic had already reached the 8th circle. Noticing the right place, he landed and slowly walked forward along the path. Then used search magic, and his eyes sparkled with purple sparks. Using magic, he spotted a deep cave in front of him. An ordinary person would see a rock there, but in reality it was a barrier made of mana. He touched the rock with his finger, and seeing how the illusion reacted to his touch, he grinned and realized he was in the right place. No one could have imagined that there were several such places. Hidden behind mana barriers in the central plains, he passed through it and found himself in a cave with a glowing crystal in the center. He knew it would be here. It was a man of stone of special quality. Demons are intelligent beings from another world who repeatedly invade and conquer other dimensions. This became possible thanks to the technology of interdimensional travel. However, there is one significant drawback when passing through an interdimensional. The time required for living and non-living beings differs greatly. Even the demons were unable to solve this problem. Ultimately, they came to this solution in the worlds they planned to conquer. They secretly installed equipment they would need in the future. This stone is the source of their power. It restores their mana. For the inhabitants of the Central Plains, it is useless because they cannot use mana. At least that was this until now. He reached his hand towards the stone and the mana began to sparkle vigorously, after which a few seconds later a powerful beam of light shot into the sky, piercing the rock. Soon night fell, the bandits were walking through the forest, and one of them turned to the fortress master, doubtfully saying that he thought everything was all right here. Ujim asked with displeasure, "Does he mean? Say he made a mistake?" He excitedly answered him that he didn't mean that at all, after which the man ordered him to shut up and thoroughly search this place. He definitely felt an explosion of energy here. Losers like him will never understand this. Suddenly claps were heard behind them and they turned around begging, applauded him and said that he knew he really was a master of the highest order. He believed in him. Jim looked at him with displeasure and asked who the hell is he. MC was silent for a few seconds, then used magic and told him with a smirk that he was an instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy. The bandits were clearly surprised by such a meeting and began to discuss it among themselves, after which the fortress master called them idiots and ordered them to shut up. He took out his sword and asked if he was telling the truth, that he meant to say that he was the cause of that large energy blast. He asked in response, what if that was really the case? As soon as he said this, an energy strike flew at him and an explosion occurred, after which the bandit leader said that then he would kill him. That was the reason he was here. Begging asked, is that really true? Hearing that he was still alive, he was very surprised, and then a cloud of magic flew at him, which he managed to block immediately after MC waved his hand using a mana blade to dispatch all of his subordinates in one fell swoop, leaving him in shock. B-Gang magically pulled the dead bandit's sword to himself and said it was a coincidence he had come here to kill him too. Immediately after their swords clashed in battle, he blocked the bandit's strike and smirked, saying that he'd better avenge his subordinates. Jim became extremely angry and exclaimed, who is he? They jumped apart, then drew closer again and began to strike and parry each other repeatedly, all accompanied by loud clanging sounds and glowing streams of energy. At one point, MC answered his question again, saying that he was an instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy, and Gujan, striking him again, mentally exclaimed that he couldn't believe it. This idiot. He's not resisting him at all. He let out a heavy sigh, then screamed loudly and released bright red energy, forcing Big Yang to increase the distance between them. His opponent used a divine art that shattered the sky and released the core. Gujan was furious that he dared to force him to use this power on him and asked if he even knew what it was. After being thrown off the cliff by traitors, he had gathered all this innate energy from the core. Dreaming of revenge, MC didn't let him finish and asked who asked him about this at all. Gujan was taken aback and said that he didn't care about the story of some useless villain. Only now did the bandit notice how pieces of ice were reaching out from his opponent's legs towards him, and had already managed to encase the lower part of his body. He looked down at his feet in surprise while MC cast an astral chain, causing two portals to appear next to his opponent. Chains fell from them and bound his hands. Now he couldn't move at all. Ice was below him. Chains were above him. Gujan tried to break free from the shackles, but he couldn't and began approached him, saying that fighting was futile. The moment the chains touched him, they began to suck out his internal energy. This spell was specifically created to defeat martial artists. The bandits seemed trying to break free again and then asked where he learned such sorcery. Was he from a demonic cult? He sighed heavily and replied that he had already said that it was magic, not sorcery, but he shouldn't expect much from such an idiot bandit. Gujan cursed through clenched teeth and said that he didn't want to die in a place like this. He asked, so he had regrets. He confirmed it and exclaimed furiously that he hadn't yet gotten revenge on those idiots who manipulated his subordinates when he was still in the Heaven Destroyer sect, the reason he worked with those disgusting guys from the Orthodox Alliance, and the reason he was holed up on this mountain recuperating. It was all so he could get revenge. When he finished, the MC applauded him and said with feigned admiration that he was so determined. This is exactly how revenge should be. Slow, careful, without giving up. The man trembled with anger and asked was he mocking him. Now, what could he know? He was just a child who grew up in comfort. These words angered him, and in an instant he appeared very close to him, and with a dark, threatening expression, asked, is it really like this? His gaze made the man nervous and wondered what the hell was going on. He wasn't just another madman, there was something wrong with him. The gang grabbed his head and said he would let him experience it too. The hell he'd endured for 200 years. He used magic, and when Gujan blinked, he found himself in a completely different place, a wasteland surrounded by rocks. He glanced around several times, trying to figure out what this crazy idiot had just done to him, and then noticed something huge behind him, a strange-looking creature that instilled terror. His eyes widened and his mouth dropped open in surprise. Then he saw explosions, warriors fighting these creatures, and heard their piercing screams, and then a battlefield strewn with the dead appeared before his eyes. A few moments later, he found himself in some kind of room surrounded by strange glass vessels, inside which people were imprisoned in a green liquid, and these unknown creatures were walking around. Then he felt agony, pain, saw a huge eye in the sky and a pile of bones before completely plunging into horror. He saw a horned humanoid creature burning in a bright flame, but it did not harm him. Returning to reality, he grabbed his head and screamed loudly, trying to survive this whole nightmare. Soon he calmed down a little, and while he was trying to catch his breath, MC asked how he felt about it. This is the future he will see in 10 years. Gojian reached out a trembling hand, grabbed his pant leg and bowed his head before him, asking him to kill him. The gang remained silent, and he looked up at him, starting to hysterically beg him to kill him. He couldn't handle this. EMC took the sword and said that he understood, but someone had to do it. After that, he swung the sword, and the bandit's life was over. Soon he returned to the academy. Semayon was very alarmed and at the same time surprised by his arrival. He looked at what he brought him and said that he couldn't believe it. In front of him was the bandit's sword and a bloody bat. Bang asked how he could do that. He thought that he wouldn't believe him if he brought only the sword, so he brought his head. After that, he folded his hands in a respectful gesture and invited him to discuss his new responsibilities as a senior instructor. A new day arrived. Semayan gathered the senior instructors Discuss everything, Yo Wenjin, the senior instructor of fist techniques, slammed his palm on the table and exclaimed that this was some kind of nonsense. Just a few days ago, he was the disgrace of the academy, and now he's a senior instructor. What the hell is going on here in the UK? Turned to Instructor Dung and asked if he really attacked the Demon Knight Fortress himself. He replied that he had gone to the Sacred Mountain in the morning and found the bodies of the bandits as well as Akyu Gugum where B-Gang had said they were supposed to be. He didn't know how, but everyone except Aku Jim had been finished off with a single sword strike when Jen explained that that couldn't be true. He was the assistant instructor in spear technique, and he was saying that he also hit his sword technique. This was nonsense. Xiang became angry and exclaimed in response, "He means his eyes. Received him, he can go and check everything himself if he doesn't trust him." The vice master of the academy ordered them to stop and asked what they were all doing now. They apologized to him and fell silent. After which he thought that no matter how he tried to understand, none of this made sense. Akugam was at least a top-level martial artist. He met with them himself and confirmed this when he conveyed the order from the Orthodox Alliance to him, for beginning to kill him in one night along with all his subordinates. That's something even he, as a master of your rank, can't do. Maybe Jin Bike helped him. He immediately dismissed the thought. After all, the old man wasn't that smart. He would have to consider this further. He turned to Instructor Dong and asked if he could still contact the Phantom Shadow Manor. The man frowned, realizing what he wanted to do. The Phantom Shadow Manor is one of the largest assassination organizations in Miriam. They are known for being willing to do any job if they are paid for it. Someone asked him to send them a request. Let him tell them to find out everything they can about B-Gang as well as what he does every day. Wenjin asked if he was really going to promote him to senior instructor. He told him not to worry. He had an idea. He handed him a scroll and he unrolled it, inquiring about it. And he told him it was a list of the disciples he would be responsible for after his promotion. His eyes widened and he understood everything after that. He laughed out loud and said that he expected nothing less from him. He had come up with such a wonderful idea. Samsung smiled reservedly and said that he would use his position wisely. After which the instructor said that he could quit his job before the ghostly shadows. The time to find out anything about him. The vice master allowed this to be possible because he had so little experience, and then turned to Instructor Dung and asked, "He gave these lists to B-Gang, right?" He confirmed this and clarified that he gave them to him right before the meeting. Simeon asked what he said, and he asked in response, what could he know even if he hadn't seen them? He simply smiled and said that he understood everything. Meanwhile, MC was heading to meet his students and thought that these old idiots were doing everything he expected them to. He had returned to this time and place for a reason. After learning of Netherlands' ability to return to the past, he had asked himself hundreds if not thousands of times what should he do to prepare for the demon invasion. The enemy was an army that had already conquered, countless dimensions being one. Arson had its limitations. He could do a lot, but ultimately the best he could do was gather an army. Not weaklings like those who had died before his regression, but a powerful army that had mastered all forms of magic and martial arts. And these were the children who were marked as problematic among the first years. He glanced at his students and thought that although they were undoubtedly talented, their personalities were holding them. Either they were untalented or they were neglected because they did not come from prestigious families. The elders thought he couldn't handle them, but they never imagined that among them would be two heroes who would excel during the demon invasion. One of them was a martial artist who had reached the evolutionary level in his 20s. The last hope of the Murum leading the alliance against the demons. The leader of the Heavenly Sword. The other was a talented marksman leading a squad specializing in assassinations and patrols, and he killed most of the demons. He was nicknamed the Divine Marksman, and these two heroes were now right in front of him. He smiled and told his students that it was a pleasure to meet them from today on. He was their instructor. Some time ago, the eldest son of the one-star sword clan, Tan Li Jun, a first-year student in the Camellia class, was beaten again by Gok Book. He struck him in the chest so hard that his breath was knocked out and he fell to his knees trying to recover. Doc Book is also from that class, the second son of the Dragon Tiger Escort Agency. He flexed his wrists and said that their martial arts training wasn't over yet. Let him get up. Lejoan wiped his drool and asked him to stop, and the guy grimaced in displeasure and asked what's wrong with him. Someone might think he was mocking him. He should be grateful he was showing off his mountain diving dragon tiger martial arts skills to a weakling like him. He replied that it was just fencing taught by his one-star sword clan, and Book smirked and mockingly asked, are these martial arts that he can't even use properly against him? He still wanted to continue learning them. Legion clenched his fist, clearly hurt by his words, and then the guy leaned towards him and threateningly ordered him to stop clenching his fists. If he's wrong, then maybe they should have another duel. Legion remembered his defeat last time and refused, after which Young Look Young, the second son of the Destructive Swords clan, approached them and told him to stop. Exams are starting soon, so he should stop causing unnecessary fuss. immediately calmed down and walked away, telling Legion he was lucky. Afterwards, the boy thanked his classmate, to which Legion remained silent and turned away. Legion looked down sadly, and at that moment an assistant instructor came to them and said that this had happened suddenly. But the academy's vice principal informed him that they would no longer be studying in the Camellia class, but instead they would be transferred to a newly formed class. This news greatly surprised them, and soon they met their new instructor, Sabi Gung. The students reacted to this with obvious confusion. Books shouted at him to stop making things up. He had already suffered enough that they had to suddenly transfer to another class, and now they had an insufficiently qualified instructor. Did they really think he would listen to such stupid orders? MC gave him a disgruntled look and said his choice of words, and speaking to a senior instructor was rather insolent. Book furiously told him to go to hell and said he didn't know what he'd done to become a senior instructor, but he wasn't going to learn from a jerk who still couldn't harness his inner energy. Begging merely chuckled in response, then used his magic and instantly appeared in front of him. The guy was very surprised, after which MC stomped on his foot with all his might, causing his eyes to pop out of their sockets, and he screamed loudly. He said that Article 3, Section 5 of the Academy rules states that if a student misbehaves, they can be punished for instruction. Book became extremely angry, gathered all his strength in his fists, and attacked him, shouting that he was an ugly idiot. The EMC easily dodged each of his punches and accused him of using foul language and violence against his senior, as well as using internal energy during class without permission. He moved behind him, making him nervous, then punched him in the chest with such force that he screamed in pain, saying that the worst thing was his pathetic martial arts skills. After that, he began mercilessly striking him with his fists and finally kicked him in the legs, causing him to immediately lose his balance and fall awkwardly. The gang approached him and, smiling, told him to get up. He wasn't finished yet. Legion, meanwhile, was shocked. He couldn't understand how this was possible. After all, this was the same Gokbook who ranks first among new students in martial arts training. He never thought he could lose so easily. Trying to get up, Book cursed at the instructor again, for which he immediately received a punch in the face. The other students became nervous and didn't dare utter a word. MC clicked his tongue and told his student that he had such a terrible condition during his very first lesson. Afterwards, he clenched his fist and said he was sorry, but the instructor's role was to hold back tears and educate. He swung, and Book managed to panic and brace himself for the blow. But suddenly, Wookie Young grabbed the instructor's wrist and stopped him, saying that it was a bit excessive for a student. The gang looked at him and smirked, noticing that he had finally decided to act. He remembered what he would become in the future and thought that he was the leader of the Heavenly Sword Alliance. Wookie Young, first-year Camellia class, the second son of the John clan, one of the prestigious clans of the Central Plain. Renowned for their martial arts, at a young age he was recognized as a martial arts genius within the clan, and even among the new students of the Dragon Spring Academy, he demonstrated excellent skill. His talent far exceeded the Academy's capabilities, and at the age of just 20, he achieved super fitness, becoming the youngest supreme martial artist in history, after which he entered the top 10 masters of the Orthodox Alliance. Originally, he was supposed to live a brilliant life, revered as one of the absolute masters of martial arts and enthusiastically embraced by all. But that would have been the case if the demons had never appeared. From the very beginning of the demon invasion, he participated in more battles than anyone else, but soon the young clan became the target of concentrated demon attacks and was annihilated. All clan members except they were brutally slaughtered. Despite this, he did not go mad with despair and grief. Like others, he traveled across the Central Plains, waging endless battles with demons, gathering survivors, and forming an allied force that surpassed both the Orthodox and unorthodox sects. Even in such a hopeless situation, when everything was against them, he led the remaining martial artists in a desperate last stand. He still remembered it. He always rushed to the forefront of the battlefield, and whenever he unleashed his blinding sword energy, even the enormous demonic beasts that seemed to cover the sky were cut down in the blink of an eye. Without a doubt, he was a hero and the last hope of the Central Plains. But now he's just another snobbish, aristocratic kid from a prestigious clan. Began waved his hand away, and Wookie remarked that it was quite amusing. He smirked and asked in response, wondering if he was surprised that the assistant instructor, who until now couldn't use profound energy, had suddenly become so strong. He told him that of course it was unexpected, but all he could do with this newfound power was show off to his students. Meanwhile, Blug clutched his head and, breathing heavily, said that it was such a shameful sight. And Wookie frowned and asked if this was also because of that fateful meeting. MC silently noted that he was quite good, then asked if he was curious if he obediently followed his teachings from now on, he could tell him everything. He thanked him for it, but said it wouldn't be necessary. He didn't know what tricks he used to suddenly change the student lists, but he would file a formal complaint with the Academy against the person responsible. He had no interest in learning from someone who acted arrogantly, solely because of luck. B-Gang remained silent and watched as he and several other students left, casting hateful glances at him. Legion stood there and looked at them in surprise. And then suddenly the MC laughed and putting his hand on the boy's shoulder told Wookion to look at himself. He talks like he's special. He thinks he can't give him anything. What if he tells him that with just 10 days of his training process, this guy can become strong enough to defeat him? Hearing this, Legion became very nervous. His words affected Wookie Young. He stopped and asked with displeasure what he just said. Gang smirked and told him that he would repeat it as many times as necessary. After just 1 week of his training program, this pathetic weakling whom he considers lower than an insect will be able to knock him out with one punch. Legion looked up at him in surprise and asked, "What's wrong with him? Is he crazy?" The MC immediately shut him up and woke. Young turned around and glared at the instructor, then asked if he was really willing to take responsibility for those words. He confirmed it with a smile and offered him a bet. In 10 days, he and this guy would fight in an official duel. Legion tried to push his hand away from his face and started grunting indignantly, trying to say something, and Gang said that if this guy wins, he will follow his teachings without objection, and if he wins, he can do whatever he wants. He can make him leave the academy, apologize, or fall on his knees and beg. He will do whatever he wants. Look. Young chuckled and said that he didn't need anything from him, then left with the other students and said in parting that they better prepare for the duel. That would take place in a week. After that, the MC finally let go of this poor boy and they both watched them go. After a few seconds, Legion realized the whole situation and grabbed his head with a loud scream, and B-Gang said that he scared him. The boy immediately turned his gaze to him, and a few seconds later he screamed loudly again, and the MC noted that he was too noisy. After that, his student pounced on him with tears in his eyes and exclaimed, "What did he just do?" B-Gang noticed that he was so full of energy and asked him to calm down and let him go. He would explain everything to him, but the boy did not listen to him at all. He was terrified. He hung on his arm and exclaimed, "Why is he forcing him to fight? Woke Young, is he crazy? What did he do to deserve this?" He was fed up with all this and waved his hand, ordered him to let go, which caused him to. After which he said that it looks like today's class is cancelled, so they are all dismissed. They left without any idea what was going on, and MCC waved goodbye, saying that the schedule for the next classes would be sent to them individually by tomorrow. Meanwhile, Legion was in complete despair, knowing he was finished, especially since it was a public duel. With a heavy sigh, MC turned to him and said that he simply had to win. Why did he think he would lose? Calming down, he sighed sadly and told him that during his first public duel after entering the academy, he lost a book. And by that he meant he lost shamefully. Since then, he's been tormenting him every day, but even that monster couldn't land a single blow on Woke Young. He was completely routed. Begging thought about his words and noted that this guy was definitely capable even without the support of the Yuan clan. His martial arts talent was truly one of a kind. Legion became agitated again and exclaimed if he already knew this, then why he told him not to worry, because he was stronger. Legion didn't understand what he was saying at all, and yet he knew that this boy would become a divine marksman in the future. But now Legion was weak and cowardly. He exclaimed that he resigned himself, that they really can't do anything about the fact that their class, the head instructor, suddenly changed. But why did he have to engage in a public duel with Wookiee? Young MC asked. He didn't understand what the matter was. He had to win the duel so he could prove his abilities. The boy exclaimed that it was his problem. What would he gain by being involved in this? He answered him with a big smile on his face that he would get an opportunity for revenge. He didn't understand what he meant, and he asked, didn't he say that that big jerk was beating him up? How did he feel when he beat him up recently? Was he excited? Did he feel relieved? Was it so great that he was ecstatic? Or was he angry that he couldn't get revenge on himself? He said so himself. Even Bulk couldn't land a single hit on Wookie Young. But what if he became so strong that he could defeat Look Young, and then he can easily get revenge on that idiot? How does he like this arrangement? Wouldn't this be a good gift for him? The boy fell silent thinking about his words and then said that if he really could become the strongest, as he said, then he would be. Gang smiled and Lead Yuan confidently stated that it had nothing to do with Bulk. He just wanted to become stronger than he was now. The instructor only grinned triumphantly in response. After that, his training began. MC sat on the roof of the building to get a better view, and his student with the sword and stood in front of the dummy. The gang said that now they would test his skill level. Let him imagine that he was now fighting Look Young and using his martial arts to his full potential. The Jin took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts, and then rushed forward and struck the scarecrow's head, after which he immediately turned around and swung his sword, starting to deliver countless strikes to it. He was tired and sweating profusely. The instructor ordered him to continue fighting with full force, and he attacked the dummy again with a loud cry. But at one moment he felt something. All his strength disappeared at once and he fell with a crash trying to get up. He began to breathe heavily, and the MC, after waiting a few seconds, called him a disgrace. The boy froze in place, and the instructor asked if he knew what his problem was, through heavy breathing. He answered that for some reason when performing the basic movements, his internal energy kept dissipating. At first he thought he hadn't learned his clan's martial arts correctly, so he tried to check it several times. However, there were no problems with his basic movements. Then he thought that perhaps the problem was in his dantian or meridians, so he checked with a doctor in his clan several times, but still nothing. Perhaps he was simply talented, or maybe he had some unknown disease. Bigang grinned and said that it wasn't that, it's just that his meridian points are located further away than others. Hearing this, he looked up at him in surprise and asked, "What does that mean?" He jumped down to him and asked. He still doesn't understand. As he had already said, he was born with more distant meridian points than most. This is usually considered a rare condition that has more advantages than disadvantages. However, because he is still young and lacks internal energy, he faces this problem. He should know that all martial artists must expend the internal energy created in their dantian through their meridian points. But because his meridians are wider than others, his internal energy cannot be concentrated. That's why it keeps dissipating. Lejeune, dumbfounded, said that this was the first time heard about this, and MC, after a short pause as if remembering something, said that this was normal. He remembered how he fought among the demon ranks, and when he was already at the end of his strength, he met the divine archer. Now he told him that ultimately this is information that he himself learned by chance. Lejeune felt a strange atmosphere and glanced at his expression, thinking, does he have some kind of story? Bigang smiled and said that he will finish. Explanation: now that he knows the problem, they should fix it. He threw a hand on his shoulder and asked hopefully, is there a way to fix this? He answered him that it is actually very simple compared to other people. They lack strength due to his distant meridian points, which means that he can solve this problem by increasing the amount of internal energy he has, since they cannot increase his internal energy in such a short period of time. There's only one method he can tell him right now. Legion assumed a fighting stance and concentrated, and the MC told him to continue gathering internal energy until he began using his basic moves. When he gathered enough of it, he would be able to reveal his true power. Immediately after his words, the boy opened his eyes, then rushed forward and swung his sword, cutting off the top of the dummy when he saw what he had just done. His face broke into a smile, after which he happily turned to the instructor and asked, did he see that his internal energy really doesn't dissipate? The MC said that he saw it with his own eyes, so he can rest assured before he fell. He didn't understand what he meant, and happily exclaimed that he had never felt so energetic before. But before he could finish speaking, he immediately fell to the ground without realizing it, and as soon as he opened his eyes, he immediately began coughing and wondered why he fell by. Gang approached him and asked how he was feeling, to which he replied that he had no strength at all. He said it was a slight side effect of using all his power for the first time. He had never used his meridians properly before, so his unadopted body suffered a shock, but this was no cause for too much concern. The side effects would naturally disappear in a few months. Hearing this, the boy sighed with relief and then realized what he had just said. The duel would take place in a week after all time passed, and they began new training. MC began swinging his baton and said that he faced two serious problems when he uses a technique using accumulated energy. Everything he had collected up to that point is expended in one blow because, as he had already said, his body cannot withstand the recoil, and he falls. However, his energy core is also too small for him to accumulate energy in advance and retain it for long. If he does this, he won't just fall, he'll risk getting caught in an energy deviation. So it's forbidden. Everything's pretty simple up to this point, right? The boy doubtfully said that he understood everything, then pointed to the baton he was swinging and asked what that had to do with what he was holding in his hands. He told him not to pay attention to the little things. More importantly, let him think carefully with that in mind. He can only start accumulating energy after the duel has begun. How long did it take him to accumulate energy before he told him? About 7 minutes. And he asked then how was he going to restrain working during that time. The boy thought about it. He knew there was no way he could restrain him during that time and asked what he should do then. Touching the baton tighter, he pounced on him and said that there was only one answer. He needed to dodge as long as possible until he collected all the energy. Legion was slightly taken aback by the sudden blow, but he still managed to dodge it. Then exclaimed, "What is he doing?" Bigang advised him to focus and begin gathering energy. He also advised him to keep his eyes on the opponent's weapon. He used illusion magic, causing even to see 22 clubs flying at him, causing him to miss the blow and take a hit on the head. Defeated, he grabbed the area where he'd been struck, and MC said he was complaining even though he hadn't used any internal energy. Let him get up, they will continue. The boy exclaimed, "Is this training?" He clarified that it is evasion training, and Legion asked why this training is so crazy. Bagong didn't like what he said and asked, does he think he is doing this just to mock him? He simply explained why he is weak and how to fix it. He even clearly demonstrated it. Besides, he guarantees him. Right now, this is the only way he can reliably influence Wilkie Young in a week. Is the training painful and hard? Of course it will be. But is it harder than the times when he was humiliated by those two? Is he really going to miss this perfect opportunity to prove his strength to everyone? Treated him like trash. Legion remembered the way Wuken looked at him, after which he gripped the sword tighter and asked the instructor for forgiveness and suggested that he continue training. He could endure the whole day if he has to. The MC said he was making it up and would do this non-stop for the rest of the week. Seeing his smirk and the way he was warming up, the boy became very nervous, after which the instructor pounced on him, and he, horrified, asked him to stop. So the week passed and it was time for the public duel. Everyone gathered to watch. Look Young, as always, stood with an important air, and Legion was waiting for the fight to begin. Only he didn't look so good. One of the students, Joe Montauk, wondered how long Legion would last. Yang Yan said that he would be crushed in one blow and fall to the ground. The girl frowned and asked, didn't he have any countermeasures prepared? The boy next to her said that he had seen him a few times when he passed by, but he just spent the whole week getting hit with a stick. Hearing this, Book smirked and thought that he was such an idiot. If he was trash, then he should just sit quietly in the corner. And this weakling dancing in front of him is going to beat Woke Young. This is complete nonsense. He fell for the scammer's trick and dug his own grave. Meanwhile, Look Young turned to the instructor and said that he had previously said that he didn't want anything, but under these conditions he wanted to set his own condition. The gang agreed and said that if he wins, he must promise to leave the academy. He never wants to waste time like this again. MC smiled and swore that he would do it, and then asked, he knows what will happen if he loses, right? He will have to attend his training. Losses without complaining. He answered him that he understood everything, after which the instructor smirked and asked, doesn't he feel like he's doing something wrong now? He should focus not on him but on Legion, who is standing there. He turned his gaze to his opponent. He had already prepared for the fight and was confident, albeit a little nervous. He concentrated, after which the instructor clapped his hands, drawing attention to himself, and said that victory would be determined when one of the parties surrendered, lost consciousness, or lost their weapon. Furthermore, any lethal or life-threatening strikes were strictly prohibited. In these cases, he as the referee would make the final decision. Waving his hand, he announced the start of the duel, after which they both drew their weapons and rushed towards each other. Before Legion could take a step, he lost his hand and watched in surprise. As it was thrown into the air and drops of blood flow everywhere, it turned out that it had all been just an illusion. His fear walking distracted him, ordering him to surrender, and he looked at his hands clutching the sword and thought, is he all right? His opponent called him an idiot. Did he agree to fight him when he was so shocked after his slight killing intent? The boy's whole body trembled with fear, and he thought, is that it just now? This meant that if he wanted, he really could take his arm off. He closed his eyes and clenched his teeth. He was terrified and he realized he couldn't do it. People considered this guy to be the best of the best in the academy, so there was no way a terrible person like him could defeat him. After only a week of training, the instructor's call distracted him from his thoughts. He immediately looked at him and saw his smile, as well as how he threateningly slapped his hand with a stick. Legion smiled nervously and turned his gaze back to his opponent, then closed his eyes and concentrated. He decided to remind himself that he wanted to become stronger than he was now. That day, a week ago. Why did he decide that he wanted to become stronger? Gathering his inner energy, he looked at his opponent and he sighed, saying that he had given him a chance to get out of this battle uninjured. After that, he bent his knees, prepared himself, rushed towards him, and jumped, saying that it was his own fault. He struck, but to his surprise, Lejeune reacted in time and blocked it. They increased the distance between them, and Lejeune nervously thought that this could end badly, that she had gathered almost dissipated. His opponent, meanwhile, used the first technique of the Supreme Dragon Sword, cutting the sky a stream of fury, and he saw many blades heading towards him. He tilted his head to the side, receiving a small cut on his cheek, and noticed that this sword, she was so powerful. He took a few quick steps, dodging the blows, and wondered if it was just his perception. He seemed to find this attack easier to dodge than he expected. His classmates, meanwhile, were in complete shock. They did not expect to see such a thing. Legion noticed that he had learned something after all, and then used the third technique of his martial arts, Double Dragon Fangs. He pounced on Legion and saw two blades heading towards him at once, which made him remember his training with the instructor. He had used the same technique back then, but now he knew how to avoid it. He jumped high in the air just before the strike, and Wookie Young looked up at him in surprise. June then landed behind him, and as soon as he raised his head, he saw the enemy already approaching him, but he was able to react to this. He continued to dodge each of his attacks and thought that he was strong. He was also fast and accurate. He expected nothing less from the technique of the best swordsman clan of the Central Plains. However, this does not mean he cannot avoid them. He does not understand why, but this sword technique is definitely the one the instructor has been using on him all past week. Remembering his training, he dodged another blow, and look, Young was surprised. This time he decided not to attack again, but simply retreated. Seeing this, everyone was shocked. They couldn't believe this guy did it. Listening to their surprised exclamations, Wilken looked sadly at his hand, gathered his strength, and gripped the sword tighter. He apologized to Li Juan for calling him an idiot. He must admit that he had learned a lot in the past week. After that, he began performing another technique which Li Juan immediately recognized: a whirlpool of bright blue. She appeared above his opponent. It was his special technique, brutal dragon slaying. He doesn't know how he knows about the supreme dragon sword that cuts the sky, but if he can evade this too, he will admit. The whirlpool grew even larger, making the other students uneasy, and Book meanwhile asked in surprise what kind of terrifying sword technique was this. But seeing what Li Juan was doing, he was even more surprised. Despite such a terrifying technique, he confidently advanced towards his opponent. The day before the duel, he and the instructor had another training session. When Li Juan was completely exhausted, began, said that he had been dodging well, so it might be doable now. He caught his breath and asked, will this really allow him to dodge all of Wookiee's attacks? When he answered that it wasn't so, his mouth dropped open in shock, and MC said that Wookiee Young wasn't an idiot. He was probably underestimating him now, but if he continued to dodge his sword strikes, he would take other measures. If he lasted until the end, he would most likely. Is the most powerful sword art currently available to him, and right now before his eyes was that very art called Cruel Dragon Slaying. It literally creates the impression that a fierce dragon has materialized, and is a martial art that generates powerful sword chi. He couldn't dodge such an attack. Jumping or retreating would be pointless. It would grow and engulf the entire arena that day. Li Juan asked how he could avoid it since he would be practically invincible. Began replied with a serious expression that nothing in this world was invincible. A storm of sword chi working together, endlessly moving in all directions, is simply what it looks like. It's not a perfect martial art. First and foremost, brutal dragon slaying is designed to destroy most enemies who are stunned by its incredible power and try to escape. The boy's eyes widened, realizing what he meant, and then McGee smirked and said there was only one way out. He needed to keep moving forward. And now, remembering the instructor's words, he walked toward his opponent, suffering small cuts from his sword. She, seeing him confidently walk toward him. Wilken was surprised. The gang had told Li Juan that day that he would try to respond instantly, understanding that his brutal destruction of the dragon had been misread, but in this situation it would simply be a surprise reaction to what had happened. Then his moment would come when he lunged. He would need to dodge and use the suppressed anger he had been holding back for so long to strike this arrogant idiot. Watching himself being attacked, Look Young became very nervous, and then their swords clashed, and his wooden weapon broke into several pieces from the impact. After that, Li Juan fell out of reality for a while, and when he came to, the gang was already next to him, keeping him from falling, and asked how he felt. He looked at him in surprise, not understanding what had just happened, and then turned his gaze to the students who were looking only at him and sincerely rejoicing at his victory, while some, on the contrary, were gritting their teeth in annoyance. The MC looked at him and asked with a smile, "It's wonderful, isn't it?" The boy froze in disbelief, then smiled and agreed with him. A new day had arrived and began headed to his first lesson, and when he entered the classroom, he saw the students sitting quietly in their seats, waiting for the lesson to begin. Li Juan was smiling slightly, but woke. Young was displeased, but that was expected. The MC smiled and announced the start of the first lesson. Some time had passed since then, and the vice master was furious. He slammed his fist on the table and exclaimed, "Didn't they agree to this? How did this happen?" He remembered Wenjing coming to him with complaints and exclaiming that he trusted him and left everything in his hands. What does this all mean? Wasn't the goal for B-Gang to leave of his own free will? Why are the students following him voluntarily instead? What's going on? Especially Tong Legion from the One, our sword clan, and Yuan walking from the Yuan clan. Both of these students now insist on continuing their training under B-Gang. Unbuckle suggested that he force them to change classes again like last time, but he immediately rejected the idea as they were threatening to leave the academy and report it to the Yonglin. Another senior instructor exclaimed that they should never have entrusted such a genius to some newbie. Right now, this is related to the academy's reputation. It's a critical issue, and all their anger fell on the vice master of the academy. How is he going to take responsibility for this? Thinking back, he was furious that they were now trying to shift all the blame onto him. They were just parasites too desperate to win the John clan's blessing. Had Wookiee Young really lost to some low-ranking brat from the One-Star Sword clan? Li Juan had said that technically he had refused to continue the duel, but according to the students who had watched the battle, it was actually a defeat. Some Young exclaimed in displeasure. Did he even hear himself? Yuan Wukyung was one of the greatest geniuses in history, even among the Yang clan. He gritted his teeth and thought that the more he got to know B-Gang, the less he understood. They couldn't leave him unsupervised any longer. He remembered that they still hadn't heard back from the Phantom Shadow Manor since they said they would consider their request. He clicked his tongue in displeasure and exclaimed, "How dare a simple group of mercenaries act so arrogantly? At that moment, one of the mercenaries' voices rang out in the room saying that they had better be careful with their words. Hearing this, both senior instructors immediately jumped up and started looking for him. That he was right behind someone, only now sensing his presence. He nervously turned around and wondered what this meant. He was a top-level martial artist and he hadn't sensed him at all. He took a few steps away from him and his subordinates appeared behind the mercenary, who said that they were here to fulfill their request. Now let them tell them more about this Sabi gang. The instructors handed them his portrait and they moved to a more included place to talk. Shadow One, the captain of the mercenary squad, asked, "Are they really spending so much money to investigate?" One rookie instructor 5 said that for a place with such a bad reputation, they seemed to be swimming in money. Number 1 said that it just showed how corrupt they were, but that it was none of their business. 7 laughed and asked if these orthodox sects didn't amuse them. They always pretended to be universally virtuous, and now they secretly ordered the investigation of their subordinates. 5 chuckled, "No it is," and remarked that they were no better taking on such pathetic requests for a small fee. 1 called out to him discontentedly and asked if he had forgotten their mission, until they found and subdued him. They were sworn to endure any dirty, despicable tasks. The man realized he had said too much and immediately knelt before him, begging for forgiveness, and he replied that there was nothing to worry about and that he should just focus on the mission. 7 asked if they should also investigate this Jinbake, the one who raised him since childhood. Number 1 rolled up the scroll and said that for now, they just needed to find and continue to observe the target. He asked if he thought the rumors about him having a fateful encounter were true. Number 1 told him not to take such nonsense seriously, but 7 still doubted it. After all, they said that he allegedly didn't know how to use internal energy at all, and then became a martial artist overnight. If it didn't happen thanks to a fateful encounter, then what did it happen? Shamarn suggested that he had hidden backers, or maybe he infiltrated here. After being set you by some hostile faction with dark intentions, that's probably what the clients suspect, which is why they hired them. That is, he could be much more dangerous than they imagined. Just don't let the target find out about them. They need to be extremely careful. Taja 5 laughed and remarked that it was such a funny joke. No matter how strong he was, he would never be able to detect the hidden techniques of ghosts. 1 nodded and suggested that they begin the task. Evening came, MC came to the body recovery pavilion and met Jinbike at a scenic spot. The old man said that he had heard a lot about him at the academy lately. Everything they said surprised him. Is he sure he will be okay? It seems like people are really starting to turn against him. He replied that jealousy and envy always accompany the path of heroes. There is nothing to worry about. Jinbak smiled and said that this fateful must have been truly incredible. Who would have thought that he would change so much? Now that he thinks about it, it all probably started with that duel. He was amazed back then by Gang, laughed nervously, and the man said that if he had lost that duel, it would have been a disaster. The Academy's vice master was clearly trying to get rid of him. MC remained silent and thought that, to be honest, he really had been kicked out. For his regression after he was brutally defeated in a duel with Manson Delk and left unable to bear the shame, he wandered aimlessly for some time and didn't even have the opportunity to earn a living. Eventually, he became a warrior at an escort agency. Despite still being unable to use his inner energy, he poured all his effort into training and physical techniques and spear combat, surviving countless dangerous escort attacks by unorthodox sects and bandits. After a few years, he became a first-ranked escort warrior. He spent over 10 years in this role, visiting every corner of the Central Plains, and over time building a vast network of connections. Then one day he came to the academy, reminiscing about old times, and that very evening demons invaded. Remembering this, he threw a stone into the bushes by the pond with displeasure, and the old man asked why he suddenly did that. He headed back to the pavilion and shrugged, telling him that he just saw an ugly frog and couldn't resist. Jinbike asked him to wait and asked why he wanted to harm that poor frog. Bai Gang laughed and asked in response had he forgotten how he used to catch and feed him frogs as medicine when he was little. After they left the pond, 2 pine mercenaries appeared from the bushes. Nearby 7 grabbed his head, cursing silently, and 5 asked, "Is he okay?" He said in a rage that this crazy idiot suddenly threw a stone at him. Could it be that they had already been discovered? 5 asked in response. Would he have just left if he had discovered them? He was just unlucky. After that, he turned a displeased look on him and asked if he seriously doubted the estate's cultivation methods because of such a trifle. He excitedly answered him that this was not the case at all, and he advised him to be more confident in his skills. He returned to his quarters, so let him continue to observe him. MC, meanwhile, looked out the window and thought about what he had already done. His first goal after regression was complete. Was it finally time to bring her? If his memory serves him correctly, she should be somewhere around there. At this moment, he was interrupted from his thoughts by a knock on the door. He told his guest that the door was open and Wookion walked inside, noticing that he was acting as if he had been waiting for him. The gang smirked and said that he thought he would start to get nervous by now. His student frowned and asked what was the matter. What was that disgusting expression on his face? After that, MC settled in more comfortably and asked what brought the young master of the young destructive sword clan to such a humble place. Look Young gave him a displeased look and remained silent, and he asked, "Is something wrong?" His student was a little annoyed that he was talking to him while lying down, but he decided to ignore it and sighed heavily, saying that he came to talk about that Dual Legion was able, albeit clumsily, to react to all the basic movements of the Supreme Heaven's slicing dragon sword. At first he thought it was just the result of 1-point play of training, but now he realized that these were movements that went beyond instant reactions. It was as if he knew all the movements and trajectories of his sword technique. Began smirked and his student asked the one who taught him his clan's unique swordsmanship must have been him, right? How could an outsider know his clan's martial arts so thoroughly? MC smiled and asked, who knows the young destructive? Lord Clan is currently considered the greatest clan in Jinyuan, quite famous among martial artists. Walking asked him to stop joking. This was definitely not a superficial level of knowledge. Did he really think he couldn't notice it being frowned and said that of course he should have noticed it? If he hadn't, he would have been very disappointed. His disciple became angry and told him to stop trying to change the subject, but he didn't let him finish and stood up, telling him to be more honest if he wanted to be his disciple. That's not really what he was interested in. He came to see if he knew the same thing. He also felt the shortcomings of the heaven-cutting supreme dragon sword, right? Hearing this book, Young was surprised. MC said that this technique was perfected hundreds of years ago and passed down within the clan as a unique swordsmanship. Currently, it is considered the greatest in Jianyuan. It possesses incredible destructive power, constantly changing trajectories and sword movements and has no gaps. But from his youth when he began studying this art, possessing outstanding wisdom, he realized something. The supreme dragon sword, which destroys the heavens, is not an invincible martial art, but as the heir of a great clan, he could not admit this look. Young clenched his fist and asked Dare. He looked down on his clans. Aerial arts began said that he could think as he wished, but he had something to say. In the near future, there will come a day when these things will cease to exist. The things they martial artists revere so much, tradition, honor, nobility, and reputation, all of them will lose their meaning. Let him think only of one thing, that he must become stronger than he is now. Let him unhesitatingly cast aside everything that stands in the way of this. The boy remained silent, after which the MC walked away from him and said they would have time to talk about it in more detail later, but for now, let him follow his instincts. Look Young remained silent, considering his words, then supposed it was possible, but something else was on his mind right now. Why did he suddenly grab that wooden pillow? Gang walked to the window and swung it, saying it was nothing special. Not to worry, just some annoying frog outside. Night fell. All three mercenaries gathered on the roof, and their captain used his unique ability to observe their target from afar. He glanced at the master of the body restoration pavilion. Jambek and Five said that he used to be an ordinary medic working in Gamsu, but 5 years ago he became responsible for the body restoration pavilion and entered the Dragon Spring Academy. Despite his abilities as a medic, he had barely learned martial arts and didn't seem to have much experience in other fields. Number 1 said they had checked him out since he was closest to the gang, but he looked like an ordinary medic, and 5 remarked that his impeccable past seemed a bit far-fetched. Noticing something, the captain asked him to wait and looked at 7. Asking what was wrong with him, poor 7 was all beaten up. He had received a lot of blows during all this time. 5 looked at him nervously, then told the captain everything that had happened to him. First a wooden pillow fell on his head, then a rock flew into his eye, and then a small boulder fell on top of him. Number 1 was speechless for a second, and then asked, are they sure they weren't discovered? 5 said doubtfully that they hadn't been careful around them at all. So they probably weren't discovered. 7 burst into tears again, and said he thought they'd been exposed. The captain told him not to doubt their clans. He must just have a bad habit of throwing things around. He'd face worse, so just let him be patient for a little while longer. The poor guy cried even harder and bit his lower lip, realizing he was going to get hit more than once, but he had to accept it. After that, they went back to stalk the gang and hid in the bushes. 7 warned his older comrade that if something like this happened again, he wouldn't hold back. He would kill himself. The man said he understood how he felt, but he needed to calm down. They had moved out of the dorm, so incidents like this wouldn't happen again. Not 7 asked what if that crazy idiot woke up and suddenly decided to practice archery. At that moment, the mercenary noticed something and told him to shut up. They both hid in the bushes, and MC left the building. He headed straight for the bushes. When he got closer, he started untying his pants and said that he felt so bad he must have drunk too much tea. Realizing what he was about to do, 7 became very nervous and thought this won't happen, right? But fate was cruel to him, and a warm stream poured right onto his head, and his older comrades stared at him in shock. Covering his mouth, 7 decided not to tolerate all this bullying and humiliation any longer and jumped out of the bushes, exclaiming, "What is he doing?" Noticing what he was holding in his hands, he froze in surprise. It turned out he was pouring it from a teapot. Begging smiled and offered him a cup of tea, and the boy, realizing it was all a deception, burst into tears and said that he knew about them all along and had done it on purpose. Pulling out his hidden blades, he pounced on him to finish him off. And just as he was about to strike him, he activated a protective barrier that broke his knife into several small pieces, after which MC grabbed his face and slammed his head into the ground, saying that it was nice to finally meet the Phantom Shadow Manor. Poor Seven was humiliated again. His comrade jumped out of the bushes and excitedly called out to him by gang, said that this is what you get for meddling in other people's. Pod 5 reached for the sword behind him and was about to attack him, but the captain ordered him to stop and appeared behind MC, after which he respectfully greeted him and said that he didn't think he had actually exposed them already. MC turned to him and said that he must be the leader of these frogs, although is it really okay to reveal your identity like that to the target of surveillance? He told him that it was a stupid question. If he killed him here and now, what problems would it cause? By gang chuckled and asked if he didn't wonder how he knew about all of them. He told him that they would figure it all out soon, then pounced on him and said that they would start by cutting off his limbs. He threw several throwing knives at him at once, but B-Gang seemed to have expected this. He used a mana blade and easily deflected. All the knives in Mindtrue 1 meanwhile appeared behind him, but he reacted in time and blocked the blow, saying that he would not let him do that. Number 1 pounced on him again, continuing to strike while MC blocked. He thought that although it lacked the overwhelming destructive power of Akam, it was fast, accurate, and deadly. Each technique was a fatal blow aimed at vital points in particular. The energy density contained in this sword was stunning. There was no way the barrier would withstand it and would not be able to continue parrying his strikes. He blocked another strike and they both retreated, and after a short pause, Number 1 said that this was strange. He had a hard time understanding what was going on, but the power and style he used were fundamentally different from the martial arts of orthodox sects. It was impossible that he simply stumbled upon this power. Could this really be a demonic art? Beginning rubbed his neck tiredly and asked if he had ever seen a demonic art in person. It had been years since the demonic cult fell, so this was complete nonsense. It has nothing to do with it. Although he's right, it's not a typical martial art. One immediately released his energy and said that he now understands that he's not someone they can simply subdue. He doesn't hold any personal grudge against him, but he will have to take his life. He decided to use the Phantom Shadow Manor's martial art 100%, and preparing to attack said that all this is being done for the sake of fulfilling their mission.